This year marks the 50th birthday of your favourite Sunday World newspaper. To celebrate, we're looking back over some of the front page stories and the scandals with the big name journalists who made it the people's paper. So join us to reel in the years over the coming weeks on Crime World. Sunday World is 50, a Crime World special. When did you buy your first bag of cocaine?
It was about 8 or 10 years ago, just on Talbot Street. And I stupidly, I remember you asking out, open into the office, I need someone to buy a bag of coke, because you had done the deal. You had done the deal on this burner phone that we had.
Oh, we're going to get arrested now.
Well, it's oh God.
No, it's
no, it's fine.
We'll
It's free. And
I'd be in the dope.
This phone wasn't a smartphone like we were used to, or whatever phone we were on at the time. And I don't know where you got that phone, by the way, Nicola. That's another day. It was kind of yellow and banana shaped, and you had heard that there was someone who was willing to deliver, like a Deliveroo, but for drugs. And you made contact with this guy. You found a number in an ad, or someone gave it on to you, and then you realised that it couldn't be you getting it. And you just said, would someone, anyone,
pick up my cocaine.
And I obviously was feeling a little brave, and I said, yeah, sure, why not? What do I need to do? And he explained that, well, look, I've done the deal. He's coming, but or he's due to come today, and I just need you to finish the transaction and go and buy this bag of coke on the street.
We better just sort of explain.
No, just leave it there. It was a great news story.
Yeah, it was a story, just for anybody who has just popped
definitely
into this. This was for a story. I wasn't just asking you to go and collect my coke for me, will you? Yes, the phone was like a banana.
It was incredible. Actually, that's the biggest gripe about the whole thing, was not buying cocaine and not being pictured buying cocaine in a national newspaper. It was the bloody phone, because I had to text him at the last minute to say where to meet on Talbot Street, and I couldn't work the phone. It was the most, I don't know, honestly.
It was like a phone for a child, was it?
Yeah, not from Western country, and like there's no screen. It was just buttons, and I was trying to work
and
through.
And it was quite big, but it was so obvious. It was big. It was like a big yellow toy.
Yeah. But we were using it to do these big news stories. I'd be discreet, and I'm walking down Talbot Street. I also remember the funny thing in the car park where we were parking. Dave, the security guy for the car park, I was just walking by to do this, and we had a photographer ready to go, and he wanted a full-blown chat as I walked by. And I'm like, not now, Dave, not now. Seriously. And I kind of made eyes at him, and he was such a nice fella, and all he wanted to do was have the chat. And I said, Dave, later. And I still don't know to this day. I should have asked him, did he stand there watching me do this deal?
Do your deal. So you got your bag of coke.
I did. We brought it back, sent it off for testing, and
we brought it back and we tested it in the sink in the ladies on the 4th floor.
That's right, because we had the testing kits.
We had something that turned it a different colour or something like that, and I then had to pour it down the sink.
And turned the entire sink blue?
I turned the whole sink blue, and somebody came in the middle of it, and I was sort of just going, sorry, just 1 second, I'm just pouring some cocaine down the sink here.
I mean, it's the not very sexy side of getting the story in the end, but that was my my
and the point of it, of course, was it was, you know,
on demand, being delivered to the door, like that, and that was
kind of new enough at the time.
That was the hook on that story. Buying drugs wasn't new. I'd actually done it previous.
Go on, tell us all about it. What happened?
So I lied at the top of this podcast. The first time I ever bought drugs was it
coke? The first time, or was?
Well, it was drugs. That was the pitch. Get down to this club in Limerick, and a very concerned parent phoned our news desk one day to say that they heard that this club was very easy to get drugs. It was being infiltrated by the gangs down there, and so the news editor asked me to go down to Limerick and get some. And in the couple of days between coming up with the idea and actually heading down, it was decided that I should go down with a female colleague as well, so that we would just pose as a couple or just pals, instead of me wandering around on my own and making it look like I was
some sort of a freak.
Exactly. So we headed off down, and we were in the club. I would say we divided a little bit at first, and I remember just walking past someone, and I kind of pegged that they might be someone who would know. I remember thinking, okay, And I was so nervous because, like, it sounds stupid now, and I could possibly do it more confidently now. But I remember thinking to myself, I can't just ask someone. So I kept walking, and
Not like
with
half
my
the rest
drink.
of the country.
Yeah, exactly. So I kept walking, and I leaned up against the counter with my drink, and I was looking at him, and then I was like,
Were you trying to look really relaxed and kind
but I
of
was trying to
cool?
look. I wasn't looking flirtatious.
But you were
that was in
trying
my
to
head.
look cool.
Trying to look cool, yeah, of course, with my baggy cords, no doubt, at the time. And I remember thinking, do you know what? His mate has left him. Now's the time. And I just asked him. I walked up to him and I said, look, you don't know, I'm down from Dublin with a couple of mates. You don't know if I can get any drugs, any coke, and he said, yeah, I do. And I said, he says, are you looking for pills or coke? And I said, no, coke is what I'm looking for. And he said, yeah, no problem. Follow me into the toilets in 2 minutes. And I literally went back to my drink, or no, I had my drink in my hand. I went back to my perch at this counter. I saw him walking in, and I walked in. There was an individual working in the Jacks there in the club, and he pointed at the cubicle, and then I went to buy it. It was all an arrangement. I walked in not knowing what to go, and I walked in, and obviously he had said there's a fella coming in a white shirt or whatever. Pointed in, and did the deal there.
And when was that?
Oh, that was mid noughties, I'd say. Maybe a bit later, maybe 07, 08. And so I was happy. Deal done. Out I went, found my colleague who had purchased 10 ecstasy tablets in the same amount of time. And we couldn't believe it. Like, honestly, it was less than an hour we were in the club. Out we went, brought them back to the office. Exact same thing as before. We didn't have the in-house toilet kits to test. So there was a system that the editor at the time knew about getting it checked. And once we had it confirmed what they were, story went. And we pictured ourselves, the Our Man kind of setup that Sunday World like to do. The two of us were pictured holding it, and then it was
disposed
of, and it caused ructions at the time. I remember,
because why? Because that would have been the point of that story. That would have been probably pre-2007, and that was the kind of when it started becoming concerning that drugs were not only just available in Dublin, cocaine was now
outside of the capital,
all over the
exactly, and a big club, newish, I think, at the time, and had been getting a lot of publicity. And obviously the parent caught the kid with a stash or something after the previous weekend, and decided they need to rumble this. She had an axe to grind, and she phoned into the news desk. And I remember John Donlan telling me, let's go after this story.
So you're kind of used to people telling you to go out and buy coke.
2 for 2, Nicola. Although weirdly, you didn't ask me directly. I put my hand up.
I don't know what the hell was wrong with you that day.
It was a quiet day, and my feature land.
Yellow phone you wanted to go with.
No, I definitely didn't.
But I mean, the point of those stories are that, you can write a story and say, it is believed that drugs are available here.
Yeah,
or it is believed
exactly.
that, or you can go and do it. And then it becomes in your face, tabloid story.
With the pictures.
Here it is.
And
we
the
just
copy.
did this and we got this. And, it seems almost quaint now, the thoughts of going into a nightclub and hoping to be able to buy cocaine when it's so everywhere. But look, we have followed the story of cocaine. From its early beginnings and the first cocaine lords and onwards, and we're still following it now. It's sort of maybe gone to places, or certainly the story has gone to places, territories that we probably won't be able to go into because they're so far away. But it has, nowadays you'd be looking at a small village, blink and you'd miss it, and going into a pub and being able to buy it and show that it's available there. But look, the Sunday World has been, you haven't only just bought drugs on it, you bought all sorts of stuff. You've been through all sorts of experiences. We're talking about 50 years of the Sunday World.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Sunday World. And all the different experiences of all the different people that have worked in it.
Yeah, I've had a mad journey. I'm 21, nearly 22 years here. And you kind of, like, as I've said to you before, and we've discussed it in groups, where it's a trade. It's not like, you kind of have to learn on the job. And I remember walking in that day in 2002, the euro had just been introduced, and I was really lucky. Someone had left a few weeks earlier, a journalist had left to go to another paper, so there was a desk free.
Who left? That was the only person in the entire history of the Sunday World to leave.
Yeah, I don't know. And
Because
but
really,
there was a desk.
nobody ever leaves. It's
Was it
like
Damien
it's
Lane?
like the
Might have been
Hotel
Damien.
California.
Yeah, I know. I put this down to the fact that I wasn't a burden on anyone. I sat at this desk. I wasn't. You've seen it, but since the work experience kids come in and they're sitting at desks and you're trying to help them out, but they're shuffled around from desk to desk. They're moving. I didn't have that. This desk was available. It happened to be beside John Donlan, the news editor at the time, and Neil was by his side, and so I had their ear. I was right there, and I wasn't annoying anyone. I was just getting on with it. And the early days, you'd get a job on a Tuesday and you'd be told just file the copy by the end of the week. Like, it wasn't like this was a young lad who didn't have any experience
or any ability, or still hasn't, to say no. Have you ever has that ever kind of like, have you ever considered maybe I should sometimes say no in life? I mean, in general.
No, I'm a yes man. And my kids would tell me otherwise. But no, well, you see,
you have to go with it.
I think that's one of the reasons I'm still here, Nicola. And you see people coming in, like, you have to just grab these opportunities. And
cringy as they may be.
I remember actually saying to John Donlan at one stage, I'm having a bad patch here at the moment. I'm not putting in any stories. Can you just throw me a bone every now and again and I'll chase it up. I just really want to. And the last time I met him, he actually remembers that chat, saying that was the time I realised you actually wanted to do this.
Right.
You're kind of you've got to grow for it. You don't have the contacts yet. You're young, but you do want to go after chasing stories.
What age were you when you came
in? 21.
And you had previously been in a work experience?
So in 1996, in school, I got a week's work experience in transition year.
And what was that like? Was that terrifying?
It was. I got one piece published. It was a rewrite. Our managing editor at the time just threw pieces of paper at me from other newspapers around the world. This was a Scottish Sunday newspaper. And he says, I'll do a rewrite on that and we'll try and get something in the paper for Sunday. At the time, I didn't realise what it meant. I just took this sliver of paper and rewrote it a few times and looked stuff up. The following Sunday, I actually went to, I remember Texaco on Newtown Park Avenue at about 11 o'clock on the Saturday night when they used to drop in the papers early. And my mum drove me around and we got the paper and I saw my byline, and I'll never forget the rush from it.
Right.
Was just incredible. Seeing my name spelled right, by the way, spelled correctly. And it was weird because I had never considered journalism until that week. I loved to write, I loved English, but I never considered journalism. And so I kind of got a bit of a bug for it then. And so then when I'd finished college, which was marketing, I didn't do journalism. I came in here to get to learn the trade.
I did my work experience in the evening press.
Very good.
Years and years ago. And I was like 15 and gawky and awkward and all the rest of it, and just totally mortified. You know what I mean? By everything and the way everything. And I went into this like bustling newsroom. There was the evening press, the Irish press, and Sunday press, and it was like I just remember just going in and being absolutely, utterly terrified.
Terrified.
Yeah. Terrified. Yeah. And I took a wrong turn and I ended up in the basement, which was the printing press. And I remember coming back up the stairs and putting my hand on the banisters. And I think I had a tattoo. Black across the palm of my hand for maybe about 4 years.
Oh, really?
Oh my God, it just never left. But anyway, I was found where I was supposed to be and was seated kind of, the way, newsrooms are busy. I feel so sorry for any of the kids that come in now because they are so busy and no one has time to take you aside unless somebody's kind enough. And then, that's my memory. Anyway, somebody was nice to say to me, sit there on the news desk and keep, watch what's happening. So I sort of sat there like if I had I didn't even have a phone back then. I had nothing to kind of occupy myself with. So I had to just sit there like a total like knob. And, hope that I could look at my feet or whatever and nobody would see me. If I had an invisible cloak, I would have put it on. And the next thing, this phone started ringing beside me. And like it was...
The landline.
Yeah. And I was going, oh, please stop.
Yeah.
Oh, please stop. Please stop ringing. Please stop ringing. And eventually this northern accent roared at me. Answer the fucking phone. Right? And I answered the phone and it was actually Mick Sharkey, who is a really nice fella, and I ended up working for years, many years later. But anyway, I answered the phone and there was like some punter on the end of it, and I was like, hello, Could you ring back? Could you just ring back another number?
Oh, could you ring back? You were handing it away.
It could have been like the scoop of the year.
Yeah.
I just wanted it all to, but it was fun. And I went down to the courts then. I sort of settled into it a little bit then. And I went down to the courts one day when I think Eamon Kelly was being sentenced, or certainly it was a cocaine case. It was in the 90s. And I went down to the courts and I was I was like, oh my God, my mouth was hanging open. But it was a scary place to do work experience. I always reckon the Sunday World would be despite what it looks like from the outside and what it looked like from the outside, I actually think it would be a warm and caring place to go in on your work experience. Somebody would take you under the wing, no?
Yeah, well, no, whoever brought me in had obviously divvied up the week. Monday to Friday, people got different days. I remember I had a day with Eddie Rowley.
Yeah, well, he would have been so pleasant.
And oh my God, he talked me through everything. He got me to do little kind of his new, it's a different column now, but he had little sections on his column at the time, and he got me to do them, and it was kind of album previews and little things. And now it probably took me all day to do it, and I'm sure he was happy with that as well. Like, and they got in the paper. They didn't have my byline. It was just little bits, but like that, little things like that are all part of the learning curve. I went out with Liam O'Connor, the photographer, down to a job in Tinahilly, and on another day, and I had a day with Paul Williams. I had a day on the news.
That was a good work experience.
It was really good. It was a good week, whatever. It was March of 96, whatever. I was in transition. Yeah, so it was good. And it gave me a graw for it. And then about five years later, I found myself back there and on a 6-week trial. And it's funny that you talk about the phone, because it's that landline in the newsroom that is just, I certainly wasn't, I was nearly fighting people off to get to the phone because it could be anything. And granted, you might waste a lot of those phone calls on there's some stories that I'm still convinced could have been stories, but as soon as the news editor heard it, he just said, no, we can't do that, whether it's legal or moral or professional or whatever the reason. And I had spent an hour on the phone to this guy, and that happened a lot. But
the ringing of the ringing phones in the newsroom, and then the thumping on
the computers
and
the smoke,
that's the noise,
in the rooms.
Smoke.
For years there was smoke,
and in some
rooms.
Places the noise of the printing press going.
Yes,
and I mean they're all to me that was like
with a really great
that's all
time.
Gone.
Oh yeah, it's all gone. We're fancy offices here now, and
the phones only ring when. I mean, my phone's probably rang about 10 times there. It's constantly on silent, by the way, if anyone can't get me. It's always on silent.
Weirdly, the guy who I sit beside in the office, his actual landline rang there a couple of weeks ago. We didn't know what to do, but he wasn't there.
Do we have landlines?
We do.
Oh,
but his computer wasn't even hooked up to it, which I thought had to.
Did you answer it?
No, I didn't.
No.
Stop.
It was probably security downstairs.
Exactly. Yeah. If anyone wants to get in touch with us with a story, it's on social media. It's calling our mobiles. It's not calling a random landline. In the office.
I'm sure so many jobs have changed so much within the sort of the 20-year period. I'm sure loads of people in different industries can remember, but. Do you think anything has changed as much as newspapers? Because they have now become something completely different. I mean, obviously the newspapers, the newsprint still exists, but it's become a kind of multimedia thing, and all those old school, like a phone ringing, like somebody actually ringing in out of the blue. Now, people still land here at the door sometimes.
They do, and you have to, it's part of the hazing. As we were, Joe, someone called up to the door there a couple of weeks ago, and we were all looking up going, whose turn is it? Like, you do have to. Some people pulled rank straight away. I know we all had an idea who was next on the list. They eventually got the hint. You do have to go down, and you have to sit with them on an awkward chair in reception, and they have probably spent hours or possibly longer days planning what they were going to say to the journalist, and they've got the paperwork, and it just like that is that is still happening. It doesn't always work out as a story, unfortunately. You have to sift through a lot of crap stories to get to the good ones, no doubt about it. But the phone ringing thing is kind of is very symbolic of the thing, especially like the Joe Duffy hour. Like, just as soon as Joe Duffy ends in the Sunday World, the newsroom phone would light up because of people waiting to get on to Joe Duffy on radio, and they didn't get on. So I need to rant to someone. I'm going to rant to a journalist in the Sunday World. So whenever that ended, 2:15 or whatever it is, the phones would light up in the Sunday World office for years. It was amazing. Like, if you weren't there, the phone would ring out. Actually, funnily enough, some of the best stories I got were were phones ringing at about 2:15, 2:30, and there was no one else in the office. I was the only one there. I was lucky enough just to pick them up. You just get that call.
Yeah.
We joked about it before when I got into the Docus prison. The only reason I got that story is because I was the only one who wasn't invited out
That
to
was
lunch.
crack. Give us a little rundown on that again. For those who haven't heard it, we did actually do a podcast on this. But
Episode 160. Well, basically, I picked up the phone. I was the only one there, and this lady, really very English accent. I think she was Leeds. I can't remember. She basically said, "You've probably heard of me. My name's Claire McDermott, and I was caught, and I'm now in Mountjoy prison, and I murdered someone a few years ago." And I went, "Whoa, what, Jesus?
You
my
did
God!"
what?
And I want to give my story. And I was like, "Okay, how do I come in to see you?" And she says, "I've given a name at the door. Just say you're Jimmy Tippett." I'm like, "Okay, I can do that. I don't have ID." She goes, "You don't need ID. I've been assured you'll get in. Bring a notepad or a recorder or whatever." And a day later, I found myself saying I'm Jimmy Tippett walking into Mountjoy prison and getting an hour with her to get her full story. I had an A4 pad. I don't know if you remember me telling you.
Yes.
I couldn't find a journalist pad anywhere. I think I stopped in a shop.
What
to
did you
buy it.
wear?
I had a shirt. I had a purple shirt on with a matching purple tie and black suit trousers. I remember it. And I had this giant pad.
Were you going for an actual look? Were you trying to look like the young lawyer?
It was what I was wearing at the time because I was still trying to impress everyone in the office. I was still probation.
You were trying to look like yourself.
Just trying to look smart. I wouldn't have said that was myself at the time. It was work, Daragh. If there was a work, Daragh, I was probably only 10 weeks into the place. And I'd say the guy behind the window took one look at me and he goes, what are you here for? And Jimmy Tippett to talk to Claire. And he looked at me and with the pad and the tie and the shirt, and he goes, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm just a friend." And why do you have the pad? And I said, "Well, I want to help her get a lawyer, so I need to get the details of the case."
That was good. That was good.
Oh, thinking on your feet, Nicola.
Yeah.
You know, I'm still here 21 years later somehow. But got in, did the chat with her, and but I don't know if you remember when I went back and I handed her a disposable camera that was in my pocket. Yeah, the managing editor told me to get some pictures of Catherine Nevin, who was in prison at the time. So I handed her the disposable camera across the table. She got it. And so I went back to get that camera and update her on the story 2 days later, again as Jimmy Tippett. Again, I got in, no problem. This time I had a smaller pad. And she didn't have the camera because she wasn't able to get pictures, but she told me that Catherine Nevin had just lost an appeal, which we knew about, but that she trashed her cell.
Yeah.
And I said, "Okay, Grant, I just wanted the pictures, but that's fine." Went back to the office, and as soon as they heard Catherine Nevin trashes her cell, that was the front page. That was the story. I was so young and naive, I didn't even see the story in the excuse that
you'd knocked your own story off the front page.
Yeah. Now, whether it would have been front page or not, I don't know, but I certainly...
I'd say a killer
Possibly. There had been no headlines, though. Like, she wasn't known. You see, it was in English.
Yeah,
so maybe,
she was still, a murderer? Or
yeah, she murdered. Yeah, she stabbed someone to death.
I think that's a pretty intriguing story.
Yeah,
that
maybe.
A murderer would...
Maybe I'm underselling myself a little bit. But so I knocked myself off the front page and had no idea who Catherine Nevin was, knew the name. So Niamh O'Connor was drafted in to help me write it. She was very sound and put my name on it with her. And then the Claire McDermott story was a spread at the back of the paper in 2021. So, and then I remember on the Tuesday, I was with my mates and someone said to me, like, "Would she still have the camera?" And I said, "She might do." So I decided to phone the prison late one night, 8:30, 9 o'clock, and we were watching football. And I said, "It's just Jimmy Tippett here. I just want to talk to Claire McDermott." And the only thing I got from, "We know who you are, Mr. Tippett. Trust me, you won't be getting in here again." Right, fair enough. Okay, thanks very much. And we found your camera. That's what he said to me. "We found your camera." So they obviously went back to the CCTV, saw who I was, saw me passing the camera, tossed herself, found it, and yeah.
Mr. Tippett,
Yeah,
I
Jimmy
love that.
Tippett,
It's that's like the name you'd call a cat.
It's a real person, though, as we discovered later. So, and he's a boxer and a criminal. So we're going to leave him alone. He's a lovely fella. And a love interest of Claire McDermott.
If I ever get a cat, I'm calling him Jimmy Tippett.
me too. Yeah, look, I'm far from that world now. I'm like in the feature side of things, but yeah, the newsy stuff was it was so exciting.
It's so insane, isn't it? Really,
it is. Like you find yourself in brothels. You find yourself with talking to cops and in court and buying drugs, as you pointed out at the very top. Like, it's just the most insane. I remember, like, I think it was 4 or 5 legal letters came in about 3 or 4 months, and they were all worthy of throwing out straight away. The news desk were not worried about them at all. They're just standard. But I remember shitting it every time a legal letter came in. Like, it was just, you're young, you think you've messed up, but you're not. You're causing a problem for someone who thinks they have a right to lob in a legal letter. I'm sure you're well used to it. In my world, I'm not. So
no, it's not very pleasant.
At the time,
you do
I was
go,
like,
God, I hope I got everything right.
Yeah, and news-wise, I was loving it and all that. But then there was talk of this magazine launching in 2003, their 20th birthday tomorrow. And I was just thinking, do you know what? I might just take this on. I mean, I wasn't giving up completely on news and crime, but it was just,
you were drawn to
another avenue.
The glamour and the celebrity.
The lighter
and
stuff. Where you're not going to be worried about getting calls on a Sunday from someone you've done an interview with. Actually, one of the stories I wrote about recently was a random prisoner in Mountjoy Square took a liking to one of my stories. I don't know whether it was one of the bigger stories anyway, and he phoned up looking for me. And I remember, and he had an English accent. He called himself Mark, and to this day, I don't know if that's his real name or not, but he was in my phone as Mark for years afterwards. But I never asked him either, so it could well be. And he said, I've just got out of Mountjoy. And I said, all right, okay. I have something that might be of interest to you. And I said, okay, well, what's your story? He says, I don't want to talk about my story. I said, okay. But I'm not a bad person. I haven't done anything really bad. Can you meet me? So I said, maybe. I was kind of like, oh, Jesus, can I bring someone with me? And he says, I'd just prefer to meet you, but we can meet in somewhere very public. And he said, the Gresham Hotel. So we met in the Gresham, and he sat down. He says, yeah, I saw that piece or whatever. And he talked a little bit about himself without giving me too many details. And he's out after a couple of years. But before he got out, he worked in the kitchen. And before he got out, he opened up one of the roof tiles and stole 20 fake driver's licenses.
Right.
And he had them for me. And he literally just handed them over. And he said they belonged to Malcolm MacArthur. And I said, but was Malcolm making these? He says, I don't know if he made them or not, but there was a turn he was doing in behind bars, and I didn't like them or whatever, and I knew where they were, so I just decided to take them. And he handed them to me, and we did this kind of big fan of these fake driver's licenses, the pink slip driver's licenses now, not what we have these days.
Not the more sophisticated types.
Exactly, not the credit card size. And we did the story, and for years afterwards, Mark, as I know him, would get on to me once or twice a year saying, look, I've heard something, and every now and again he'd throw me something. Just, he kind of weirdly built up a weird rapport.
What was his motivation? Because that's always the first thing. It's
not an axe to grind.
Cynical.
I always go straight to axe to grind. What is it? And in that scenario, I'm putting it down to the fact that maybe he was pissed off with Malcolm or someone in the prison, and he knew where these were.
Yeah.
There might be a bit of ego, or he just wants to have a say, or the Sunday World was like the Bible in prison systems, and I'm sure he saw it every Sunday, and maybe a bit of him wanted to have a small part in that. And
it's interesting because I always want to know somebody's motivation, and I'm probably okay with their motivation. I just want to know it.
Do you ask them, or do you try and work it out yourself?
No, I would often ask people what is their motivation. Or sometimes people will actually sort of realize that, that I might ask that, and they sort of will preempt it and say what their motivation is. And I'm usually okay with the motivation if, okay, they mightn't like a guy. That's okay. I'm not okay with it if it's obviously something that's going to put somebody else in danger or whatever. It's a kind of very difficult thing to work out with certain pieces of information. And certain pieces of information you can never sort of publish because you realize that the motivation is not something you're comfortable with, and it could have a kick-on effect or whatever. I mean, you do your best. It's like a difficult world to maneuver around.
You have to navigate a fine line there, I suppose. I don't in my current world, definitely not. Motivation is just publicity, whether it's a movie or a TV show.
Exactly.
In his scenario, maybe he did have some other reason, and I was maybe a little bit naive to not ask him. But at the time, I was just happy to get out of there alive, to be honest, Nicola. I didn't know.
To talk about your more recent roles and interviews and etc., you say the motivation is clear. So there is a clearer path in regards, but there's a kind of an alliance happening there. We're getting something.
Yeah.
and
Correct.
they're getting something.
And
And
rarely
usually
they...
people have something to sell when they come
Correct.
looking for publicity.
Correct.
Celebrities don't always just want publicity, or people
They choose their time.
They choose their time, yeah.
And I've got to the stage now where it's not, I'm absolutely, my default setting is to make sure that everything's on the table. The worst thing you can tell a journalist, certainly a features editor who's going to make the call ultimately, is you can interview this person, but you can't ask them about this or that. Or you can ask them one question, or send your questions in advance. That's just not going to happen. Like that's contrived. It's controlled. It's not what we want.
Does that happen often?
Yeah, more often than. But we just say no.
Movies and
we say no. And some Irish celebs as well have notions beyond their station, to be honest, and they think that they've got profile, and they'll do an interview for as a brand ambassador, and not for a TV show or a movie or something that will further their own profile, but for an actual brand ambassadorship, which is purely just for money. They can love this tan, or that they can love this product as much as
to talk about.
And they'll do the interviews with so many conditions applied to them. So we just say no. Like, I mean,
because that's an ad.
Completely, it's an ad. So why would we pander to that?
Yeah.
So it is happening.
And when you say people have notions above their station, from the little bit I've done, sometimes it's people who are maybe less
correct,
well known.
The A-listers would be more sound than the Ds and lower. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And that's
and is that the people behind them, do you think, or is it them?
Oh God.
That's
actually a bigger question than you think, because I often wonder, is this the PR person putting these conditions on the interview? Or is it the individual who has said, I know that paper, or I know that market, or I know that individual, he can sit in on this interview, but he cannot ask me questions about this or that. Is it someone pulling the strings? I don't know. I'd love to know. I'd love to be able to actually at some point have an informal chat with some of these individuals and say, do you know that I was offered an interview with you last year, but these were the conditions? And if they weren't the conditions, they'd probably be shocked. If they were, they'll probably lie and say, oh, I didn't know that. You know, so it's hard to know. But you don't.
And what sort of, like, is there standout assholey conditions that is there like...
Well, the worst is you've got, send us the 8 questions in advance.
Right.
And you can't deviate. I only ever did it once.
So what's the point in going?
For
print?
For print. So
you'd be taking notes about the answers. So what's the point in going? They could just email you the answers.
Oh,
it'll be that
sorry,
shallow.
Not the email answers coming back. It's so they have the questions in front of them.
I know, but what's the point? So they're cleared. You go in and you read out these questions.
8 questions, yeah. So what's the point of being there? Just send the recorder to the agent.
Exactly.
And exactly. What is the point? They, I mean, and sometimes that's in a group setting as well. So your 8 questions are with possibly 8 others. So you're getting more copy, but it's all still controlled, and it's your take on the answers that you can. That's the only difference between.
I don't think people understand the machines that are behind all this.
I think they're getting it now. I think you see Entourage in some places. I think it's more transparent these days. But what they aren't seeing is that there are strings being pulled from stage 1 of the process here, and you'll get the email, you'll see the headline, you'll see the individual, you'll get excited temporarily until you see the conditions that are applied.
So they are offering up the interviews. I mean, do you also go looking for interviews if something
all the time. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's obviously a sort of a cleaner way of going about things.
Yeah, that might come back with some conditions as well. And you know what? You might be more willing to allow a few conditions on that one, because it's not part of a publicity train, and it's not something that has been thrown into your inbox. It's something that you've actually sought. So you might be more willing to take a hit on some conditions there. But there's no proof of copy as well at any stage, just to be clear. That's the ultimate kind of insult to, can we see what you're about to print before it goes to print? That just doesn't happen. Like, no. I mean, some PRs ask out of, but they're not going to get a yes out of that one. Like,
the Sunday World is inherently Irish, and that's really what was the secret to its success. Out there in the communities, and rural Ireland in particular, it's always had a connection with rural Ireland, and I think probably that shows in the features and in how we handle showbiz, celebrity, and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
we would be very concentrated on a lot of the Irish stuff. The foreign big names come in and out, and of course we take an interview with them if they're offering it. But really, ultimately, your expertise is around the Irish stars.
And as you spoke to Eddie recently, like the country music scene, it's one of our it's one of our go-to niche kind of areas, and we would never ignore it. It's a scene that is there's a lot of snobbery about, and a lot of people would absolutely look down their nose at it. But it is a thriving industry. The halls and venues are filled every single weekend, and the acts travel around. We are advertising their gigs, and we are interviewing them, and Eddie is nearly as synonymous with some of the bigger
Yeah.
names in that sphere. That's definitely something, and we always kind of championed young Irish music artists, not just in the country scene. Luckily, we have someone like Eddie who gets those interviews, and to be honest, like Eddie would be in our news meetings every Tuesday, and he'd be talking about an interview with someone that we may not have heard of, and he'll kind of harp on about her being the next big thing, and it's more than likely she will be the next big thing, whether it's a global star or it's a YouTube star. There are
He's got his finger on the pulse.
yeah,
like,
and that music and showbiz scene, and Esther for the movies, and
I was going to say about Esther
Eugene for the
McCarthy,
showbiz
because
as well.
she's very much done that in the acting scene. Esther, she has always identified the up and coming, and has
Absolutely.
been in there from the beginning. And obviously, the most famous, I suppose, being Colin Farrell.
What does she know, Colin? She never talks about
it. But their relationship goes back to the very
Yeah.
early days with him, and he would still be in contact with her. Like, I mean, they've built up a trust relationship the way we all have to with our contacts, be they in showbiz, in the in the movies, or in
Yeah.
the underworld.
Yeah.
But so yeah, and when it comes to things like that, she's more sort of movies. But what about TV? I mean, I choose what I want to watch when I want to watch it, and I always put that down to being busy, or just not being home at the same time, or I have a very kind of a haphazard schedule. But actually, I just think is it my generation?
No,
Is it?
well, I mean, I think that's normal, what you're describing, to be honest. While Winning Streak was on, when it was on, those big kind of headline-grabbing RTE shows, Twitter lights up, like Room to Improve.
Yes.
That hour, 9:30 to 10:30 or 8:30 to whatever it is, on a Sunday evening.
Well, I would watch that if I was.
Yeah, you
if
see,
I
and
had it on, like I would.
But that's
watch
the thing.
that.
It's those
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
shows. You can see, if you don't watch it live, you're going to know what happens before the end of the show, because of, if you're on social media. It's one of those things where it's almost interactive with Twitter at the time. Like First Dates, for example, is brilliant to watch while you've got Twitter open, because
And does that influence then what you do in the?
we would
in the
probably
paper?
pick up on a lot of stories from the likes of,
Do you
like,
see the
would.
interest basically on social
Oh yeah,
media?
you would have to. You'd have to act on that quite actively, and we're lucky now that we have the website that we can act straight away.
Yeah.
In the past, like previously, if Room to Improve had thrown up, there was some bonkers homeowners through the years. You'd have a week to wait before you could even do anything with the individual. Whereas now, if you get hold of them on the Monday, it's going to go up online straight away. So yeah, you have to react to all of those. You definitely do, and I think it's important. Our feature section, which is in the middle of the paper, obviously every Tuesday we come in and we start again. You rip it up from last week. There's very rarely anything hanging over. Some of the news stuff, because we operate at such a level in our news side of things, which you know better than me, they're exclusives. You can hold them from time to time because you know what's going to hold until the following week. Feature-wise, it mightn't be exclusive, but it also will be 2 weeks out of date. You kind of need to act a bit quicker, so you kind of tear up the script every Tuesday.
And what makes
again.
it different nowadays is it's still that sort of inherent connection with Irish.
Weirdly, like we'd have a big celebrity draw. Like we have our centre page, for example, our centre page spread in the paper, which it will be celebrity driven every single week, no matter what. And it's hard sometimes to come up with 52 different centre page spreads in a week that you think are worthy of the main spread or the biggest spread in the paper. So yeah, you don't just focus on Ireland, but there'll always be an element of celebrity. The only time we dip out of that is when it's news, and we might get some human interest stories, which we're really interested in, because I think people of Ireland like to hear about people's problems, and if they're better, or if there's a fundraiser, or if there's a sick child that you want to help, or I think there's still something about people opening up and being vulnerable in the paper that can kind of gauge or pique interest for the readers.
It's actually funny you should say that, because I had Father Brian Darcy sitting here some weeks ago, and he talked about those early days in the first few of the 50 years that the Sunday World has been in existence, and he said exactly the same thing. It was those stories of, people in need or whatever that actually got people to come, to start engaging with the
Yeah.
paper, and they had all these envelopes coming in of money
Oh,
for
yes.
people and all the rest of it. And so, things have changed, but in a way, things haven't changed. And
Yeah,
maybe
there's a bit more technology now, and there's a bit of a distance between ourselves and envelopes full of money anyway. That's
True,
for sure. There'll be a GoFundMe link on our social media pages as
Yeah.
opposed to that.
Yeah.
But the same method is
The same
is there,
sentiment is there.
giving people a voice. It's only for one day. It's
Yeah.
only for 1 week. Like that Sunday, it's their chance to say something. It'll be quickly forgotten, and I hate to break it to them, but it is. You move on quickly enough. But if you can help that in some way, those stories always do really well. It's actually an area that previously mentioned Esther is very good at as well. So she usually takes care of that for us.
Yeah, and it helps a little bit along the way.
Yeah.
To finish, Daragh Keany, what shirt are you wearing
Shirt?
to the party?
I can't wear this now that you
No.
brought it up.
Can't wear that.
So I'll have to find a new one, do
Have
I?
you a brighter one?
Have I got an invite to the party?
Yeah, of course you have. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll get brighter than this then for you.
Okay.
Are you going to go black?
Probably. Probably.
I will wear a big shirt for you.
Yeah.
For the party.
Wear something
I
party.
absolutely will, yeah.
Okay. So you're 21 years.
21 and a half years now.
21 and a half years Sunday World. Hope you enjoyed every minute, and
Loved it.
many more to follow.
Thank you, Nicola.
Thank you, Daragh.